I read this on ebook, and I have a hard time retaining information from ebooks, so I've forgotten the characters' names, but I'm not gonna let this one little twist ruin my day. What's up, y'all? I'm Deidra, and this is ShadeTree Reads. This is going to be my March and April wrap-up, basically a confessional on how I failed the magical readathon and the stay-at-home reading rush. Sorry, I have some notes here. I have my, as usual, my notebook and what I was gonna do for my magical readathon and the other readathon that I didn't get around to doing. So I'm gonna be looking down and maybe over at a couple pieces of paper in the midst of this video. I don't remember how I wrote these down. I'm pretty sure I just wrote them down in just a haphazard order. So we'll just start from the bottom of this list. The first thing we'll talk about for what I read in March is Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin. First of all, this was probably the second piece of work of N.K. Jemisin, and I read the 5th season and I totally fell in love with her writing and her storytelling style, so I immediately became a stan just off that one book. I gave that one 4 stars. It's a short story in a series. I think it's called the Forward series. It's a series that is being promoted heavily on there, and it has a bunch of different authors writing short stories, but they're published separately. It's not like an anthology. Anyway, so Emergency Skin is about I don't remember any characters' names because today is March 4th. Today is May the 4th, and I read a lot of stuff. I've drank a lot. I've done some things in between then and now, March and today. So I don't remember a lot of the characters' names, but to the best of my recollection, this story is about it's like you're in the head of a android, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's like you're in the head of an android. I read this via audiobook, and I think I also read along with the ebook, but I'm not 100% on that one. But for sure the audiobook, and it's very short. I think it was like 2 hours maybe. About 100 and something pages. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, it's like you're in the head of an android, and the android, like the AI, is you, and you're talking to this android that is going about a mission. And as you progress through the story, you kind of feel like the AI and the android have sort of separated, and the android is sort of starting to think and be made aware of its own feelings and its own consciousness. And yeah, it was good. I think around the same time as I read this, I was watching Blade Runner 2020 and Blade Runner 2049 for the first time in my life. But anyway, so at the same time as I was watching those, I read this book, and so it made me really kind of put those together in my mind. The way, if you've watched Blade Runner, either of them, if you know who Joy is or Rachel, kind of put me in the mind of as if we were the AI, the programming that was, I forget the name of the programming in those. It's not Skynet, that's Terminator, but whatever it's called in Blade Runner. Shit, I'm already at 5 minutes and I only talked about one book so far. Anyways, I gave Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin 4 stars, and that was the first thing I read in March. The second thing I read in March was Layover by Katrina Jackson. This was about Lena and, gosh, I just looked at this. Lena and Tony. Lena is a travel blogger, and Tony is a podcaster, and they kind of connected over an event dealing with influencers. And right before Lena's gonna take a trip to, is it Thailand? I don't remember where she was on the way, but she was about to take a trip, and she's just really unhappy in her life. She kind of started being a travel blogger, kind of under traumatic circumstances. I don't want to give too much away, but she kind of started it as like a reaction to something that happens in her life. And Tony has still been this podcaster, and he's trying to grow his brand and try to grow his audience. And she goes on this trip after having met Tony somewhere, and they have all this online chemistry that both of their fans are seeing, and they're flirting online and kind of making a connection. And then right before she goes on this trip, he invites her for an interview to kind of sort of, you know, just kind of like, it's my homies, kind of like I, you know, booktubers do live videos together, kind of like that. But it's kind of an underlying sexual tension going on in the conversation of setting this up. And the book mostly talks about what happens once they finally get to their date. And I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I mean, not fine. When I say fine, sometimes that comes off kind of shady, and I know this is ShadeTree Reads, but I don't mean it like that. I just mean I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. It didn't knock my socks off. It wasn't bad. I liked the writing. It was just so short. And with romance, I try to just rate things on how it feels, how I kind of vibed with the story and the characters. It was just, I think this one was just a little bit too short for me to really be like anything other than say it was okay. The next book I read in March was Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. My bookish friend had encouraged me to read that one, and I was like, of course, I love vampires. I really went hard for the Sookie Stackhouse novels, as I might have said in another video already. And it just took me so fucking long to get through it. It was completely fine. Like, Anne had to describe every single emotion that Louis felt, everything that Lestat felt, everything that Claudia felt, everything that the lookers on felt, the bumps in the wall, the crevices in the pathway. She had to describe everything. And so that's why my mass market paperback was 300 and something pages in the teeny tiny font. And it just took me so long because it just felt like a bunch of filler. Didn't like that aspect of it. A lot of the story kind of moved slow. There was stuff going on all the time, but some of it was less important to the overall theme. I mean, this is book 1 in like a 10-book series, so I am not mad at it. I gave it 3 stars as well. I have the other 3. I have the first 3 books. I have Lestat here, Vampire Lestat here. I plan on reading it soon. It's just like, damn, bitch, could you like give me more payoff for the amount of time I spent for reading this? It was just so fucking long and not a whole lot happened. It was just a lot of setup, and I didn't enjoy that. That knocked off a lot of my enjoyment. There's another E word. A lot of my enjoyment for this book. But I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. The next book I read was The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I've been up and down the stairs. I don't feel like going back down the stairs to get my copy of it, but it rocked my whole world. I did a whole separate video on this book, reviewing this book. I gave it 5 stars. If there was a question about that, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. To just briefly describe what it's about, it's basically the story of how New York and its boroughs are represented by these avatars, and they have to defend the city against this very Lovecraftian villain or antagonist, and how they sort of meet each other and some of the different things, different characteristics of each borough and all of that, and how they come together to beat this villain, this enemy. It's just, the story was just so good. Check out my other video if you want a little bit more in-depth talk about it. I just gushed and gushed and gushed about it. So, but just check out my video for a little bit more insight into what I liked about The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, which I read in March. The last two things that I read in March were actually manga. I read It Is My Brother's Husband. I gave volume 1 4 stars, and I gave volume 2 3.5 stars. I don't remember why I took off a half star from the second one, except maybe I was just a little bit disappointed in how it concluded. Yeah, sorry about that angle change. My phone got full, so I had to spend a few minutes deleting some stuff. So like I was saying, I don't remember why I took off a 2 star or took off a half star from the second volume of My Brother's Husband, but I enjoyed this thoroughly. I enjoyed it a lot. And that is all that I read in March. Let's move right along to April. So April was the month of the readathons, and I just straight up failed. One major reason why I failed is I just was not in the mood to be in front of the camera. I just wasn't here for it. And finally all the pandemic stuff had started to catch up with me, and I wasn't here for it. I was still reading. I read a decent amount in April, but I just couldn't get it together to where I could fulfill a list of for real TBR, because I'm a mood reader through and through. Anyways, so I had picked out Metal Charmer, which was going to have 7 prompts. And then I had picked out the books for the stay-at-home readathon. Like I've already said, the first thing that I read was something that I got from the library before everything got shut down. And that was again, I don't feel like going back downstairs, the books downstairs. The Insidiaries by R.O. Kwon. Yo, this book was only like 214 pages, and I got to page 70 after about 2 weeks. Yeah, after about 2 weeks. I got a little bit past page 70, but I just don't remember off the top of my head. And it doesn't show me in Goodreads because I put it back in my want to read in case I do end up getting back to it maybe for this month, but I highly doubt it. It took me 2 weeks to get 70 pages into a 214 page book, and it was the writing. There is nothing else to blame here but the writing. I just didn't like it. It didn't vibe with me. The premise was so good. It was supposed to be about I think it was supposed to be a love story, not necessarily a romance, which if you don't know the difference between those, I'm going to have you just go holler at Uncle Google. But it was supposed to be a love story about these 2 Korean kids in China who were getting involved in some way that I remember, that if I'm remembering correctly, they were getting involved some kind of way in a cult. And you got a recipe for magic for me, but the writing just did not live up to what the premise could have been. I need to say something, and this is kind of embarrassing, but I need to say this. I think it was Mina over at Mina Reads. She had tweeted something. This was a while ago, like the beginning of April or the middle of April. And she was like, blah, blah, blah. This is the weirdest thing I read this week. And I took it upon myself to jump out there with my whole chest and say that I had read a passage in this book, in The Incendiaries, that was along the lines of, I thought what I had read was that in this particular scene, this girl, the main girl, I think her name was Phoebe, I thought I was reading that she had gone home with this dude, and the dude had cut a slit in her thigh and fucked that slit in her thigh. But the way I fucked that up, it's just beyond. But the word was not thigh, it was tights. It wasn't Thigh, it was Tights. Like, not only is there extra letters in there, but there's like repeat letters. I don't know how my brain did that, but I need to come clean and confess to the internet that, because I put it on the internet that the wrong thing, and people are like, oh shit, I need to read this book because there's a scene. No, even though that's fucked up. No, I I messed that up. My bad, y'all. The next thing I read in April was a manga, and I read it in ebook form because I got the first 2 volumes from the library, and then the 3rd and 4th one, which I'm reading the 4th one right now, so I won't talk about that one. But the 3rd one I bought that one because I needed it in my life, is Food Wars. And I was introduced to this from Ashley over at Bookish Realm. She started reading this a couple months ago, and I am in an anime and a manga and a graphic novel phase right now. Like, that's just helping me continue to read. After I read The City We Became, I was afraid of getting into a book hangover, and I kind of sort of did, because the Insidiaries it really messed up my whole month of April. Like, I couldn't make myself read that, and I just couldn't pick up anything else because I was like, damn, this book is only 214 pages. Anyways, we're not talking about that. We're finished with that. We're talking about the Food Wars. Okay, I am very sorry about that. If there is a big change in the angle here, had some technical difficulties, threw a little tantrum on Twitter, checked the trash bin, and now we're back. I'm not sure how far I got in telling you what Food Wars was about. So basically, there's a 16-year-old kid. All he wants is to be loved by his father. He already works in his family's restaurant, but his father really don't really fuck with him like that. It's just kind of like, oh, I got this kid, whatever. So his father wants to take a vacation, and he's gonna close the restaurant while he's gone. And someone's like, oh, well, let me run the restaurant while you're gone. And his dad's like, no, but if you ever think you're gonna earn my love, basically. He doesn't say that, but basically that's what he means. He's like, go to this school. It's an elite Japanese cooking school, culinary school. The cream of the crop, the best. If you don't go to this school, you're really not shit in the Japanese culinary world, or just like the culinary world, period. But especially the Japanese culinary world. So go to this school, do well at this school, and then maybe we can talk about, maybe even think about, maybe just like me claiming you, basically. So that's what Food Wars is about. And Volume 1, I gave 4 stars. Volume 2, I gave 3 stars. And Volume 3, I gave 4 stars. It was such a cool little story. I'm so glad Ashley over at Bookish Realm started reading it and put it on my radar. Anyway, so I suggest, if you want to, I think it's a good starting point for somebody who wants to get into manga. There is an anime that goes along with it that I haven't watched yet. There's like 30 volumes of this manga, so I wanted to get to like maybe volume 15 before I tried watching the anime. So anyways, that is Food Wars. The next book I read in April is The Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste. I read this one because I saw Luxurious Blue reading it, and his review was excellent. Check that out if you want a more in-depth synopsis than what I'm going to give you. And then I also saw Chloe at Thistle and Verse reading this. And so I was intrigued, and I needed something to keep my mojo going with reading. So it's a middle grade, and it was available at my library, and I was like, yes. Again, I've forgotten these. I've forgotten the characters' names, and I can't even go and look it up, because after my little tantrum that I just had, I took a lot of my stuff downstairs, and I'm not going back downstairs to try to grab it and get this together. This is a shit show wrap up. April was a shit show, so it's fitting. Anyway, so The Jumbies was about this girl who lives with her father and had lost her mother. I believe it's Trinidad. And the Jumbies are these creatures that are indigenous to the island, and over the course of time have become sort of ostracized and kind of like pushed off into the back of people's minds, and almost become an urban legend, but they are real. The story of The Jumbies is about this little girl who ends up realizing something about her heritage in an effort to save her father from this woman in green that has popped up on the scene and is causing havoc, and kind of like decided that her dad and her house and all of that is where she wants to be and is rightfully hers, and so she has to kind of fight for that. Forgotten her name. I'm just, like I said, it's a shit show. I gave that 4 stars, and I do intend on continuing with the series. I think the next installment is called Rise of the Jumbies, if I'm not mistaken. I think that one has some mermaids in it, so bring that to me. I want that. The next thing that I read was Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas, and I read an ebook of this from Kindle Unlimited. Y'all, this book, it could have been good. It just was too fucking long, and that is why I ended up giving it 2 stars. It was a romance, and basically, again, I don't remember people's names. No, I don't remember people's names, but the main character is a 19-year-old girl, and we start out by following her on the night of her birthday. Like, this is not spoilers, this is within the first, either in the prologue or within the first chapter or so. But basically, the main character is on her birthday night, she works at this bar that's kind of like, I'm gonna say it's similar to Hooters, because it's not a strip club bar. She's gotten off work early because it's her birthday, and she had already spoken with her boyfriend at like 10 at night to have him pick her up at 2 when she gets off normally. But since it's her birthday, her boss let her off early at like midnight, and her boss gives her a box of wine and a box of donuts as a birthday gift and a couple dollars in cash. And she calls her boyfriend, and it's funny, I can remember the boyfriend's name and the other dude's name, but I can't remember her name for shit. She calls her boyfriend at midnight when she gets off a little early, and he doesn't answer the phone, but she's not tripping because she'd already talked to him 2 hours early, and he was like, cool, I'll come pick you up, no problem, babe. And so she decides, well, he didn't pick up and I'm off early and I'm not gonna be mad at him yet. Let me walk around the corner and go to the movies. Cool. So she goes to the movie, and as she's with her box of wine and her donuts, and she goes to see an 80s horror movie because that's kind of her thing. And as she's getting ready to sit in her seat, or as she's trying to get comfortable in her seat, she drops her box of wine and that shit goes everywhere. And then while she's trying to get up to clean up the mess, she drops her phone, and her phone just kind of like yeets off into to the rows of seats in the darkness. She gets up and she tries to go find her phone, and she's looking in the dark, and she's like slinking through the seats trying to find her phone. She doesn't have a light because the only flashlight anybody ever has anymore is the one on their phone, and the phone's lost. So as she's doing this, she bumps into this dude, and she's like, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, I lost my phone. And he was like, oh, well, let me help you look for it. And then he shines a light, and he sees this wine just everywhere, and he's like, well, I guess this is you. And she was like, yeah, my bad, I'm just trying to find my phone and enjoy this movie. And so the dude, his name is Pike, which is a fish and not a name. Pike helps her find her phone, and they sit there and they enjoy the movie, and they kind of vibe during the movie. They feel comfortable just chilling next to each other, even though they just met. They're physically attracted to each other. So the movie's over, they walk out, and they're like about to part ways, and they're kind of like, it's awkward because both of them are like, damn, I really like spending that little bit of time with him. And I can't remember who gets the phone call, but one of them gets a phone call, and it's the girl's boyfriend. And at that point, it's revealed that the girl's boyfriend is actually Pike's. The girl's boyfriend's name is Cole. And it's revealed that Cole is actually Pike's son. So, and then it kind of fades to black from there. One more thing I need to tell you, which is a little bit spoilery. No, it's not spoilery because you already know Cole is Pike's son. But a little bit after that phone call, it's because Cole is in jail. So he's never going to pick her up at 2 a.m. And it's kind of like, well, shit, here you go again. And a couple days after that, Cole decides that he's gonna make it up to his girlfriend that he was in jail the night of her birthday, and so he decides to have a surprise party for her. But she's at work that night, and instead of waiting for her to get off work and come home, Cole starts the party without his girlfriend, and he ends up getting drunk, and there's a fight, and they end up getting evicted out of her apartment because, of course, Cole lives with his girlfriend because, of course. Then they end up, after Cole gets them kicked out of her apartment, they end up going to live with Pike to save money and to get back on their feet. And so, shit, the rest of the story is kind of like how that goes, with baby girl kind of like realizing that Cole ain't shit, and then that Pike is actually everything she ever wanted, and then how Pike is like, well, shit, that's my son's girlfriend. And Cole he barely even is in the story after that initial shit. It's like, it was just way too long. It didn't need to be over 400 pages. It could have been, if it had been like 250, maybe 300 tops, I think I would have gave it 3 stars, maybe 3.5 stars. It just took them so long to figure out how they wanted to get together. It took them so long to tell the parties that needed to know what was going on. It took Pike too long to tell Cole that he was into old girl. And it dragged where it didn't need to drag. I really need to finish this. So the last book I read in April was Lakewood by Megan Giddings. I gave it 3 stars. It reminded me a lot of Vita Nostra. I can't pronounce their names, but the author's names. But it was about this girl that was having hard times and had a sick mom. And one day she gets this invite to go participate in a research study, and she's going to be paid well for it. But she can't tell anybody about it. She has to sign an NDA, and she ends up going, and it's kind of weird. And she feels weird about the experiments that they're doing on her while she's there. She feels weird about the town that this facility is in. But her mom is being taken care of. Her mom is happier than she's ever been. And it's just, it just was boring. It didn't need to be as boring as it was. Nothing really happened. There was no real conclusion. Who knows what the fuck that was about. I should have probably rated it a little lower than 3. The only reason why I didn't is because I wasn't that mad at it. It wasn't, if it had been any longer, I would have rated it way lower. Thank you for watching. This has been my April and March wrap up. Please watch my next video and give this one a like if you enjoyed it. Again, this is Deidra with ShadeTree Reads. Bye, y'all.